Welcome to the Well Seasoned Librarian Podcast. I'm your host, Dean Jones, and I'm so excited to be here with you today for Season 11, Episode 8. In this episode, I'm nerding out with a bona fide Fanny Cradock fan, Kevin Geddes. Kevin is a writer, researcher, an academic blogger, presenter, and all-around Fanny Cradock expert. He lives in Edinburgh, Scotland, where he runs his own management consultancy and indulges his passion for the past. We'll be discussing the multifaceted and interesting TV host, Fanny Cradock. Cradock was an English restaurant critic, television chef, and prolific writer. She frequently appeared on television at cookery demonstrations and in print with her fourth husband, Major Johnny Cradock, who played the part of a slightly bumbling, henpecked husband. I'm so excited to talk to Kevin about Fanny Cradock's life and career, and to hear his insights into her unique personality and cooking style. I think you'll find his episode to be both informative and entertaining. So sit back, relax, and enjoy our conversation with Kevin Geddes. Welcome to the Well Seasoned Librarian Podcast. I'm your host, Dean Jones. Today, I'd like to introduce Kevin Geddes, who is a writer, researcher, academic blogger, presenter, and all-around Fanny Cradock fan. Kevin lives in Edinburgh, Scotland, and runs his very own management consultancy, as well as indulging his passion for the past. Kevin, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thanks so much, Dean. It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, we mentioned Scotland, but tell me about where you grew up and how did your family influence your love of food and cooking?
Yeah, so I grew up in Scotland. I've not always lived here, but I did grow up in Scotland. A tiny little town, village really, called Kilpatrick, Durham is where I was born. Maybe just a couple of hundred people there, so a real kind of community setting. And food was always really important in our family. So I remember growing up and cooking and eating and sharing food with family all the time. We seemed to cook everything from scratch, so it was a lovely way to be, I guess.
Now, I grew up, my mother had some old cookbooks that were from the 60s, the Mad Men era, and I still have them. She gave them to me when I moved out, and I really love them. I love all the illustrations. You know, they're very, of course, of the Mad Men era, and they have basically recipes and photos and illustrations from that time period. Did you have a similar thing growing up where you got to pore over some old cookbooks that kind of influenced your passion for retro cooking?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I mentioned that my family were big cooks and bakers. So there's one particular book over here in the UK anyway, it's a popular book. It's called the Biro Cookbook, and it's a brand of flour, Biro. And, lots of households had this book. And I remember when I was young, I cooked my way through it. So I learned how to cook, I guess, using this book. It had everything in it, from cakes to pastry to savoury items to bread, that kind of stuff. And when I started to cook and read it, I kind of realised that everyone in my family also had a copy. So every time I went to visit my gran or my aunt, they'd produce something, for us to eat, just some biscuits or shortbread or a cake or something. And I would start to recognise them from this book. So when I became older and starting to collect books, I wanted to go back and find some of these recipes and find if they worked. So and still worked, for me, and kind of reminisce about my past, I suppose. So that was how I got into these old cookbooks. And I guess at the time that maybe I was reading them, they weren't so old, but as I've got older, they are retro cookbooks to me. So.
Does your love of retro extend to other parts of culture, like art or music, or old movies or television?
Yeah, in some ways, I'm not someone who lives completely in the past. I've got an appreciation of the past, and I love all these old things. Particularly like old movies, I guess. When you mentioned that from the list, the old black and white, even silent films, but the whole kind of Hollywood glamour and all that kind of stuff. That's very me. But I love modern things as well. And I guess my taste in books and music and culture and art are really varied. It just so happens that my love of food is situated in kind of retro styling and old-fashioned ideas. But I also love modern cooks and modern cookbooks too, but not quite as much.
You are recently completing your PhD on the history and development of television cooking programs in Britain from 1936 to 1976. So you're in the process of completing that. Can you talk about your research for this project and some of the interesting things you've discovered?
Yeah, sure. I'm really fortunate that I'm able to do a PhD in a subject that I love anyway. So it's a PhD that I pitched to my university to do, and really builds on previous research for my master's, where I researched the work and career of Fanny Cradock. So this PhD looks a bit more widely at how television cooking programs started in Britain and how they developed in the first 40, 50 years of life in British TV. And it's an area of media research, but also food history research that isn't very well documented. So obviously it's perfect for someone conducting a PhD and kind of looking at things, but it's fascinating for me to try and find all the stories that can retell history and restore some of the personalities that are perhaps forgotten or disregarded or not well understood. So, it's something that I really love doing. It can be difficult because the programs that I'm talking about often don't exist anymore. They were wiped from the archives or not saved or broadcast live at the time, and there's just no copies of them anywhere. There's one or two things that pop up on YouTube or in really weird archives and personal collections, which is great. But the majority of the things I'm talking about don't exist in a visual form. So, I've had to find different ways to kind of recreate them and research them through written archives, through newspaper, magazines, through cookbooks, all the kind of things that go with television cooking, and try and figure out, how this kind of very ordinary, everyday aspect of our life, watching cooking shows on TV, how did it all start? And particularly in Britain, why did it start in the way that it did? And, how has it changed, if at all, over the years, really, to what we see today?
I know today, when we watch food programs, in America at least, most of it's fairly jocular, and I think the attention is right now on food trucks and very casual food, or even extreme food, that most of it's very ridiculous. But I know that when I was young, and I'd say my first memories of watching TV cooking shows, I'd say would be probably, to be fair, about 1970. And at that point, we had a lot of things still that had like James Beard, Graham Kerr, Julia Child were the main ones, I think, in America at least. And the emphasis, I think, was often on European cooking and how to raise the bar so that you can have more gourmet cooking. And gourmet cooking was a really big deal. What was the food like that you were what was the food writing or the food television like that you were researching for your PhD, and how did that kind of inform the culture?
Yeah, so I mean, it's really varied, and the timeframes that I'm looking at are before World War II, so 1936 to
Yeah.
1939, and then after the war as well, 1946 onwards to 1976. So before and after the war, I think things were really different. Before the war, television was brand new and quite experimental. Not many people had TV sets in their home or could receive the programs that were broadcast, but the programs were quite spectacular and quite entertaining and quite frivolous. I guess they were, or they seem to be. I really wish that I could see them, but from my research, that's how they seem to be. Really fun. One of the main personalities who cooked on TV before the war was a chap called Xavier Marcel Boulestin, and he was a French restaurateur in London. And he cooked a variety of things, but he cooked, high-class French cuisine. The people that were watching were upper-class people in London, so it kind of matched what they were doing. Maybe they were popping out to restaurants and buying his cookbooks, but they wanted to see him in action making things. Some of the things were quite simple. Maybe like an omelette. I know that Julia Child are also famous for making her omelettes, so he started making omelettes on TV in 1936. But some complicated things as well, and other things that matched more into the kind of culture of the day, I suppose. So it wasn't all about food, it was about the correct wines to perhaps have with a meal, or even down to which type of glass to serve the wine in. How to engage your dinner guests in conversation, how to perhaps make things fun and have an after-dinner entertainment section, the different quizzes, things like that. So it really matched, I suppose, the culture of the day. If we zoom forward to just after the war, so television here in Britain took a break during World War II, but when it returned, food had changed, and food had started to be or was ending the period of rationing, and food was quite scarce. People couldn't get hold of things like fresh eggs, for example. So a lot of cookery on TV was demonstrating the use of dried eggs and products that could easily be found for people at home. So some of the recipes and the styles changed, but they still tried to make it quite entertaining. It was only kind of after this, perhaps in the 60s, that food on TV became quite instructional, and maybe, as you mentioned, quite mundane, I suppose, before a resurgence of some of that entertainment. So you mentioned Graham Kerr, he was really big here too. On TV. His show obviously was syndicated around the world, but he was really popular here in the UK, and he kind of ends up my period of history and my period of research by kind of resuming that entertainment style and those kind of values. So maybe you can recognise some similarities between what I'm talking about with Marcel Boulestin and his love of wine and entertainment, with the same kind of thing that Graham Kerr was looking at. Also wine, entertainment, audience interaction, but recipes, I guess, more from around the world. So recipes here in Britain, I guess, tend to focus on either British or French, and sometimes if TV cooks in the past were thinking about being a bit more exotic, they would look at things like Italy or Sweden or countries like that, but mainly French and Britain, and tended to flip-flop between the two.
How difficult was it doing research for this PhD? Did you have access to certain libraries or archives that helped you out?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I think, as I mentioned, a lot of the visual archives are just lacking, are not there. So there's not those kind of records. But the BBC, the main broadcaster here at the time that I was looking at, the time period, the BBC, the British Broadcasting Corporation, they have extensive written archives where they keep every letter, memo, and note that's ever been written about TV cooking or any form of television, actually, in various files. So they have access for academics, and they were vital for me in being able to research the thinking behind some of the programs, and to try and get to know the personalities a little bit, to read their letters, to read their memos, and to read their feedback, and kind of match that with other visual records, I guess, that I have, such as photographs or magazine articles and things like that can put them together. So both things together. So some recognised institutional archives, but also informal archives and things that I've collected perhaps myself, in terms of magazines and cookbooks, but also spent a lot of time in just libraries, looking through cookbooks and matching recipes to ones that I know that were produced on TV.
Now, your blog predates, I think, we're going to talk about the book next, but the blog, I think, predates the book. Did the blog help you get research done? Were there people that saw your blog and said, oh, hey, I'm a fan and I collect this, this, and this? Was that instrumental in your work as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So my blog was very focused on just one person, Fanny Cradock, and she produced a series of weekly magazines that she sold in Britain in the very early 1970s. And you could collect these magazines into various binders and folders and, you know, have a complete collection of her work. And it's highly illustrated with weird and wonderful photographs of every recipe and also step-by-step pictures of how to recreate them. So it was a lovely collection of work, but it was also it was in 80 weekly parts, so it covered everything basically from her career, and it's fascinating to look at. So I decided to cook through that in a kind of Julia and Julie, Julie and Julia type of way,
Nice.
and see, you know, just how was it? You know, did these recipes stand up? Are they just weird and wonderful to look at, or are they actually interesting? Can you learn to cook using Fanny Cradock's techniques? So that was the idea behind my blog. And yes, it attracted a lot of interest, actually. And, a lot of people interested in retro cooking. But one of the main things that it brought to me was actually the guy who owns Fanny Cradock's own archive. He contacted me while I was doing my master's and said,
wow.
I have her archive, all her letters, her scrapbooks, her
Wow.
career. Is there anything that you could do with it? And I was like, are you absolutely kidding me? And even better, he lives very close to me here in Scotland. So
no way.
it just kind of all came together very, very nicely. So obviously with his permission and blessing, I was able to use the archive to guide my master's research, and also just gave me a really good insight into archives and the processes there. So really helped me to gain my PhD place too. But yeah, that was one of the best and most brilliant connections that the blog brought. But there are many others too. You know, just people interested, family as well of Fanny Cradock and of other television cooks contacted me and said, oh, I love what you're doing. By the way, I'm her cousin, or by the way, my dad was her son. Would you like to speak to us? So lots of like really positive stuff. And I know that people sometimes say the internet and particularly social media is not such a friendly place, but I particularly found it to be, and people were very generous in sharing their information, their ideas, and anything that they could help me with, actually, which was great.
So we're coming to the topic that I've been eager to talk about with you ever since I first heard about it. You have a new book out, Keep Calm and Fanny On, The Many Careers of Fanny Cradock. And, we talked about your blog and how that influenced it. How did your love of Fanny Cradock come about?
It's really hard to pinpoint, but when I was growing up, she was always around, but she wasn't cooking on TV anymore. She was quite old at this point, but she was on various chat shows and game shows, and she was a bit of a television celebrity. But actually, the time that I became most fascinated in her, which is something that tends to happen to me, is when she died, and that was in 1994. And there was, a fair bit of press coverage about her, and I knew her previously, and I'd seen her and was just kind of fascinated by her. But the press coverage here in the UK was really negative about her. It was really, quite horrible, and didn't seem to match up with this kind of vision of a person that I knew and thought highly of. People said that she couldn't cook, and that she was a fake, and that she, was a horrible person, and not the usual kind of things that people say when someone dies. It's usually, oh, it was so great to work with them, and that was lovely. So it just kind of piqued my interest. How could these two things be true? How could she cook on TV for over 20 years? How could she publish nearly 100 books in her lifetime? And how could she become such a huge celebrity, at least here in Britain? But yet there were people who said it was just all a bit of a fake, and that she wasn't the person that she said she was. And, things that she was famous for, cooking and celebrating food, she couldn't even do. So I just wanted to investigate her a bit more and find out more about her life, and, how things had come about for her. And how she'd managed to become such a huge celebrity in the UK. It's fascinating to me that people still remember her. She last appeared on TV 30, 40 years ago, but people still know her name and can visualize her here in the UK, at least. She's kind of imprinted on people's minds, not always for the right reasons, but there's something quite intriguing and fascinating about her, and I just wanted to find out everything that I could about her, really.
I mean, I just dipped my toe in looking about her life, and there's a lot of it on Wikipedia, and I think my mouth dropped open several times. And I mean, you did not pick a boring topic to research. I mean, this is a very interesting person. And I would almost, even go as far as saying, I'm surprised that somebody hasn't done like a full length feature film or miniseries based on her life, because it's that interesting. Do you want to talk about, the origins of Fanny Cradock and how she came to be?
Yeah, I will. I'll caveat what I'm going to say with just a little warning that her Wikipedia page can be quite wild and not always the most accurate. People tend to love all the people tend to love all the kind of stories about her, and the stories become reality. They get printed and then they get cited on Wikipedia and as things. But actually, she did have a really fascinating and weird and wonderful life. It's just some of the facts and figures on Wikipedia tend to get distorted. But hey, that's always the way. She was just a really fascinating person. Not much was really known about her early life, but she started off her career when she was a little bit older. So in her late 30s, 40s, she became a food campaigner and was determined to become a journalist. So she wrote some food columns and fashion columns in newspapers. Her parents were both in the industry. Her dad was a playwright and novelist, and her mum was an actress. And I think she'd had quite a flamboyant life. For example, her mother's name is Bijou, which is a French word for small. It just kind of gives you an idea of the kind of life that she grew up in. Her father chose the name Valentine as his pen name, so his books are published under that name. So it's quite a flamboyant existence, I think, that she had, but not a happy childhood at all. Her parents were both quite self-centered and didn't really have much time for her, which is something that she was accused of being much later in life too. But she kind of channeled her energies into being a success in all the careers that she chose, and she loved writing. She's one of those people who could possibly and probably write 24 hours a day if she could stay awake. She seemed to always be writing. So she had endless newspaper columns, magazines. She wrote lots of books as well, children's books, fictional books, travel books, things that were quite uncommon, I guess, for anyone to do, but for a woman to do, particularly in Britain in the 1940s. It wasn't the kind of career that women were encouraged to do, travel around and review restaurants and hotels and things like that. But she was keen to do that, and it kind of led her into doing radio broadcasts, and eventually she managed to persuade someone to give her some time on TV. And it was discovered that not only did she love TV, but TV seemed to love her too. But her careers before that, as a writer and a critic and a journalist, carried on all through her life too. And I think, as I mentioned earlier, she published over 100 books in her lifetime. She was just endlessly
That's
publishing things.
Wow, that's a real. I mean, I know there are people that have done that, so that's not unsurprising. But just in addition to everything else, that's quite a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. It'd be a great career in itself, but it was just one of her many careers, I guess, and that's why I gave my book that subtitle, because she had so many. So, if you look at her television career, it's a fantastic career on its own. If you look at her novels, it's a fantastic career on their own. If you look at her travel writing or children's books, they're fantastic careers on their own too. So she did all these kind of weird and wonderful things, but her main driver, I think, was just to keep working and keep writing. And she loved being famous, and she loved people knowing who she was. She liked that kind of adoration. So television seemed perfect for her. She could connect with lots of people at the same time and impart her knowledge and help them. She really felt that she was helping. Sometimes her tone was quite condescending and quite difficult, but her motivation was to try and help people, I guess.
I was watching her on a YouTube video and I noticed that, but I also noticed too, I want to be fair, because wasn't that kind of the mode of the TV presenters at the time period, that they kind of had that kind of persona?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, things were different, So if you've watched some of the clips on YouTube, and there's some great clips there to see of her time, the shows tended to be 15, 20 minutes, sometimes half an hour long, and she would be cooking 6, 7, 8 different things in that time period. The shows were recorded mostly as live. There wasn't much of a budget behind cooking shows in general, particularly not for her. So things had to be done really quickly in kind of one take. And if things started to go a little bit wrong, you can see her sometimes getting a bit tetchy. But they were very personality driven shows anyway. So the cooking shows weren't just about learning how to cook. But it was, about enjoying watching it and learning to love food. I guess Fanny Cradock believed that if you really wanted to learn to cook, you could watch her and feel inspired, and then go and buy her cookbooks and try it out for yourself. Or you could just sit back and enjoy it. She didn't really mind either way. She would prefer it, of course, if you bought her books. But she just kind of loved being on TV and being that personality. And I think you could still see, and certainly I can see when I watch those clips on YouTube, she really connects with the audience at home. And you want to watch her. You feel kind of compelled to watch her. Sometimes it's because she can look a bit strange, or she says something a bit strange, or she makes something a bit strange, but you want to keep watching. It's not something to have on in the background. And I think that is the mode of those shows at the time, that they were something to be consumed and just really quick. I guess they never thought that 50, 60 years later anyone would be watching them. They were fairly disposable programs, and were treated as such, really, I guess. But they were fun at the time, and they were on here in Britain. They were on the schedules in kind of prime time evening slots. The thinking was that the housewives at home would do all their cooking and all their housework, and then settle down to watch it with their family. Really, it was a kind of family entertainment mostly. Some of the programs were on in the afternoons too, to try and encourage people at home to cook these fancy things for their family. But Fanny's shows in particular, they were entertainment shows, and pitched very much as that.
There was a level of and again, I know that Wikipedia is an unreliable narrator, but I saw a lot of, I think a lot of the illustrations or the photos as well. there was a level of theatricality where it was very much a persona where, and I even think that she enlisted her husband at the time, before he passed, as kind of a person to be on the show with her at times, or am I getting that wrong?
No, that's absolutely right. And I'm smiling wryly because she introduced Johnny as her husband, but they didn't actually get married until 1977, after
Wow.
her television career. So they'd cooked together on TV for over 20 years before that, as husband and wife, and that was very much how they presented themselves. But she had quite a checkered past with husbands, and she had several, and sometimes a couple at the same time. So she wasn't able to marry Johnny until much later. But yeah, that was the persona that she created. Definitely the Fanny Cradock that you see on screen is that persona. And I think that she was the type of person that actually became that persona because she was living it so much. So she started off creating it, but it just became her. And she couldn't really shake it off towards the end. But it, very definite, as you say, very theatrical, perhaps again from her background. As I mentioned, her mum was a theatrical actress and her
Yeah.
father was a playwright, so he was writing plays all the time. That was the kind of world that she knew. And she, when she was young, she didn't really get a lot of attention from them, so she had to be theatrical to be noticed, I suppose. So yeah, she took that into her television career, but it was also something that people at home wanted to watch. They wanted to watch something different. And she wasn't always very supportive of Johnny on screen. That again, that was the
No.
persona that they had. But people tell me in private it was very different. They were very loving and a nice couple. I guess that doesn't always make such a great story, but certainly on screen, he was put down and put upon by her, and she was very much in charge. And again, in 50s and 60s Britain, that wasn't a role that really women or housewives had. They were very much in their husband's shadows, I suppose, particularly on TV. So for someone like Fanny Cradock to not only be a magnificent woman with a great career and be really confident and be really entertaining, but also to have her husband by her side who was a bit hapless and needed a bit of support, gave her something to react to, almost like a comedy performance, almost like a theatrical performance, like a kind of Laurel and Hardy or something like that. Somebody who was really skilled and someone who wasn't so skilled. So she could always point things out that Johnny wasn't doing very well, or say that she'd been teaching her how to do a certain thing. And she carried on doing that with other people as well. So she brought in a range of assistants to help her on TV, and kind of phased Johnny out of the TV work, if you like. But she carried on doing that. So it looked as if she was helping and supporting and encouraging and passing on her skills and knowledge to other people. And that's what she felt she was doing to Johnny, and that's what she wanted to do for people at home. But it was a very useful technique, I guess, to have that act, and she called it an act, that they performed on TV together, to enable her to be dominant and authoritative about her cooking and her ideas, but also for them to provide some comedy moments, I guess, and some entertaining times together.
Now, I know that this is a podcast, so people, if they're not familiar with Fanny Cradock, can you describe her appearance? Because there was a level of theatricality, especially as she aged. I saw pictures of her at different ages, and I think this became more of a persona of the 60s and maybe 70s. But can you describe her appearance and how she dressed?
Yeah, so I mean, her appearance changed dramatically. She started cooking on TV in the mid 1950s, and kind of finished in the mid 1970s, so a period of 20 years. And when she started, she was already older than most people on TV, and
Yeah.
so when she ended, she was again much older. When she started on TV in the 50s, though, her appearance was quite flamboyant and spectacular as well. She used to cook in ball gowns, and there's clips of her at the Royal Albert Hall, which is a huge performance space here in the UK. And she wanted people to see her wherever they were in a theatre or see her on TV. And I think we have to remember, I guess, that the TV pictures weren't as clear and bright as they are today. So she wanted to stand out. So she wore a lot of jewelry and sparkles and feathers and sequins and things. People have accused her of being resembling a drag queen, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it was just simply to make her stand out and to make her notice. So if you happen to switch on the TV, you would see her. And she carried on that kind of change of her appearance throughout her career of the 20 years. She modernized herself in the 60s. She became very kind of fashionable, and people commented on her outfits in positive ways. But in the 70s, when most of the clips that survive today, and certainly the ones that are on YouTube, she was approaching 70 herself, and she had a very particular style. She used to draw eyebrows on her forehead, and they seemed to get higher and higher the older that she got, which gave her quite a surprised look. And again, perhaps links back to some of the comments that people make that she was a drag queen. She had that kind of flamboyant look, but again, still lots of big dresses and jewelry. And she had kind of a mixed feeling about it, because she felt that sometimes her clothes and appearance distracted from her work, but she also knew that it was how people would remember her, and I guess still remember her. So if you search through TikTok or any of the social media sites for her, you'll see clips of her looking quite strange and looking quite flamboyant. Some people might describe her as grotesque. I would never do that, obviously, but she was quite an elderly lady by then, and just having a bit of fun with her appearance and trying to be quite hip and chic in the 70s, but it didn't quite catch on. But before that, she was really fashionable, and she actually appeared in the pages of Vogue magazine wearing kind of tailored outfits and things in the 50s. And she was quite known for her fashion style and fashion sense. So it's just a shame that most of those clips that survive, as I say, come from her later years where things were a bit strange.
She had a lot of great slogans that she would say when she was on television, such as, "This won't break you," "This is perfectly economical," and "This won't stretch your purse." Do you know of any others you want to talk about? Because I kind of loved these. I thought they were kind of fun.
Yeah, she became known for these kind of catchphrases, and she brought them into almost every TV show. So if you do watch them, you'll start to spot them. One of her most famous ones, of course, was "It's all in the booklet," because she would say, like, don't worry if you can't really follow what I'm saying. It's basically in my book. Go and buy it. But because the BBC is a public service broadcaster here in the UK, advertising is not allowed, and she wasn't allowed to promote her books, but she could mention that she had books, of course, and she could encourage you to do that. So that kind of became one of her catchphrases. Don't worry, I've got you covered. It's all in the booklet. But she also used to say lots of things too, to kind of encourage you to kind of do things her way, I suppose, and surprise people just as she surprised you. So she used to talk a lot about, if you do this, you'll be able to get one up on your neighbours that you never really liked anyway. They'll be really envious of the way that you cook and the way that you present stuff. So she would say that a lot. This will really annoy your neighbours. So do this at your next buffet party, invite them round and watch their faces. It was that kind of feeling that she wanted people to have, that they were doing something secretive. Of course, the neighbours would be watching the same programme and not be at all surprised to see people create Fanny Cradock dishes. But she kind of had that interaction with people, and the catchphrases were very much part of it. Here we are today, all these years later, talking about her and her catchphrases, and she made it memorable, and she wanted people to remember her at the time. I guess in her wildest dreams, she wouldn't have thought that we would be talking about her still today. But I think that those phrases and the way that she put things and kind of got into people's psyche is all part of it, is all part of why people remember her. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of the stories that surround her are not always positive, and she perhaps was responsible for putting out some of those stories too, because she understood that those were the kind of stories that people would remember and talk about in the future. So it was the same with her catchphrases. She just wanted people to know instantly it was her and talk about her, and probably make some press headlines. So I guess the equivalent today, she would be trending on Twitter or whatever with the kind of things that she said. But they made headlines and got press stories, and people talked about her on chat shows and game shows, and people impersonated her because they were able to mimic her catchphrases.
So would you say she was the first influencer?
Yeah, it's an interesting point, because a lot of my research around all the television cooks focuses on their ability to advertise and influence, particularly within the constraints of the BBC here in Britain, where, as I mentioned, advertising and promotion was just really not allowed, really, at all. But yeah, I think that she was the first person that really got it, and she connected her work on TV with her own books, but also everything she did was sponsored. So going back to some of those YouTube clips that you've watched, if you look at them again, you'll see she's always standing in front of a very particular type of cooker. It's a gas cooker with a high grill. It won't surprise you to know that she was sponsored by the company who made those for a kind of lifetime deal to always promote that particular cooker. So she insisted that it was there in the TV studios. She brought it along. It was her own cooker, and she had endless copies of it from the company. But also, if you bought her books, that cooker's on the front cover. She recommended it and all the products that go with it to cook with. Everything down to the foil that she used on TV, or the particular butter or things like that. They were all kind of placed and sponsored by people, and she found very secretive ways to show them on TV that wouldn't break the advertising rules. And actually, the people at the BBC didn't even realise that she was promoting them, but she was. And then she would write about them in the newspaper and in magazines and make it quite explicit that she was using those products. But on screen, she never mentioned their names, but everybody knew which products she used. So yeah, I think she was an influencer, and she would definitely kind of love social media now. That would be her audience, and she would love to think that she was the best at that. And she certainly got a lot of money from it, and she was always advertising and doing various advertising deals. So yeah, I think she is an influencer. She certainly was.
There was an incident I was reading about where she fell out of favor with the public. I guess there was a contest winner that was supposed to prepare a meal for some celebrities, and she was part of the celebrity panel, I guess, for lack of better terms. And it kind of caused her to fall out of public favor. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, it's called the Gwen Troke Incident. And it
Yeah.
was a program here in the UK called The Big Time, which was a kind of talent show for various different careers. And they invited people on who wanted to be professional in whatever career they had. And Gwen Troke was the person who was on cooking, and Fanny was guiding her and supporting her and judging her. Yeah, so it's one of these stories that followed her round and you know followed her onto Wikipedia, that it kind of ruined her career. But actually, I think the true story's probably just as interesting, but people are not as keen to take it up. But the whole thing was not fabricated, but they'd worked together many years before, a few years before, 5 or 6 years before, and the TV bosses knew that they had some chemistry, and they kind of staged the whole fake, disgust at some of the items that she'd cooked, and tried to create a little bit of press furore about it. It's often reported, and again, it's one of the stories that happened after she died, that it ruined her career, and there was huge disgust about it, and people were outraged at the time. But certainly my research, I can't really find that there was that much outrage at the time. People didn't particularly like it. They didn't like the style. But if you look back at some of the clips now, they're quite tame, actually.
Yeah.
They're not horrific. She didn't really go for it, particularly, I guess, if we look at some reality TV shows now that perhaps follow that mode. The judges can be quite nasty and quite difficult, I guess, and that's the role that she was cast in. And she wasn't there to just be nice about everything. She wanted to help, but I guess Fanny, being her, she wanted to be remembered, and she wanted to make the headlines. So she kind of played up to the camera, and certainly helped to make the show memorable, helped to make Gwen Troke's name memorable as well. And she wasn't someone from a TV background, and very, very different to Fanny Cradock. But yeah, it was certainly one of the last times that Fanny cooked on TV, or appeared on TV with food. But did it end her career? I'm not so sure. I think that she was really fed up of cooking on TV at that time. She'd cooked already for 20 years and was trying to get her retirement plan in order. She had plans for kind of blockbuster saga type soap opera books that she wanted to write. She wanted to produce Dallas before it became Dallas. She wanted to do all that kind of flamboyant stuff behind the scenes, and get away from TV. So it was a convenient way to kind of draw a close to her cooking career publicly. But I think that she was very much involved in the demise, and really, it's one of those stories that kind of become more of a story after she died, certainly. And no one's around really to say that it's not true. She would love it, actually, that we're still talking about her just again in connection with that story. It's made her memorable. Here in the UK, if you mention her name, people say, "Oh yeah, she was terrible to that cook on TV." And it's just one of those stories that builds and builds, and people talk about on these kind of reminiscing type nostalgia TV programs with talking heads. But at the time, it wasn't as big as it appears now.
You tried to work your way through the Cradock cookery program, but you also, I think, have the incidental difference of being a vegetarian. How did that work out for you?
It was okay, actually. I just, made a choice, obviously, that there'd be some things that I wouldn't cook. So some skills that she wouldn't be able to pass on to me. But and a lot of her cookery program is quite meat heavy. So sometimes I would use replacements, but just sometimes I would skip over some of the recipes that were just simply about meat and those. But it's a real balance, and I was really surprised actually to find that a lot of her cookery was naturally vegetarian, or that she'd considered vegetarian people as well back in the 50s, 60s, 70s. Again, just a bit of a surprise. But a lot of her cookery was based around cakes and breads and things like that. So they weren't too problematic to do either. So I definitely read all her stuff about meat and talked about it, but I didn't cook it myself. No.
Are there any modern day food influencers or TV food personalities that you enjoy, that you follow?
Yeah, it's tricky now because maybe I know too much about it all. Studying my PhD, I kind of sometimes think, oh, do I have to watch another TV cook? Some of them are great, like I like people like Nigella Lawson, which I'm sure is someone that you know over in the States too. And
I adore her.
She's kind of I don't know if it's a controversial thing to say, but she reminds me a lot of Fanny Cradock. So she's quite glamorous and savvy, and that kind of influencer mode of having all the products on display. Certainly here in the UK, if Nigella uses a particular mixer or a bowl, people are straight on social media trying to find out where it's from and how they can get that. And it was the same with Fanny Cradock. Other TV cooks now, I enjoy watching for different reasons. So my kind of, if I was to describe it as a guilty pleasure, my guilty pleasure is watching The Pioneer Woman. I just think that she's hilarious from the US, and just so bizarre. Some of her recipes, I'm sure, are not what people in the States cook, but she also reminds me a little bit of Fanny Cradock. She just does things to be memorable. She has all her products, her skillets and everything from her own store. In fact, she seems to own the whole village or town that she lives in. But I find her quite amusing, but it's not because of her excellent cookery skills, I guess. I suppose the food influencers that I follow have changed really, and it's more food historians now that influence me. So, I'm sure that I know you've had many on your podcast too, but they're the people that really interest me. The people that are trying to place history back where it should be, and kind of rewrite the history books and make sure that those Wikipedia pages are accurate, I guess. But providing, great books and great resources, blogs and podcasts about food history is really the things that influence me now.
So what's next for you, Kevin?
Oh gosh, hopefully so much. So as you mentioned, I'm just about to complete my PhD. So hopefully that will be completed in the next month or so, and everything will be handed in, and obviously I have to see how that goes and hope that I pass that. But I've definitely got more writing in me about television cooking and history. There's so many characters and personalities that I want to tell their stories, but also other writing, I guess too. I find a love of writing myself, maybe a gift from Fanny Cradock. I just love writing about different things. So lots of stories to tell, some books, perhaps some more research. I'd love to stay in academia in some way or other, and do some more research about early TV and cooking, perhaps around the world or more in Britain, who knows. But definitely I kind of love the mix of research, writing, and then communicating about all of those things that the academic world gives me, but also publishing world gives me. So maybe I've been influenced by Fanny Cradock and just want to take over all these different careers. But certainly more research, more writing is my long answer there on a short question. But yeah, more to come, definitely.
Well, good luck on your PhD, although I doubt you need it. And I want to tell the listeners, if You think we missed anything or you want to hear more about Fanny Cradock? Don't worry, it's in the book. You can read Keep Calm and Fanny On. You can get it on through all major retailers. We're going to have links in the bio as well. So, Kevin, thank you for being on the podcast. I really had a great time talking to you. I hope we get to have you on here again.
Oh, thanks so much.
That was my conversation with academic researcher, author Kevin Geddes about the career of TV presenter Fanny Cradock. Next week, we'll be talking with James Beard Award-winning food writer Beth Dooley about her books and career. More next week. Until then, I'll see you at the library.